Hey guys, it's me, Rich. You were told that this was about protests, about optics, about compassion. But what you're about to see tells a completely different story. You watched Minnesota leadership posture, grandstand, and demonize federal law enforcement while chaos brewed right under their noses, and they didn't care. This video breaks down what actually forced the sudden reversal in Minneapolis, who panicked, and why everything changed the moment federal pressure became real. But what you'll soon find out is that this was never about peaceful dissent or public safety. It was about exposure, leverage, and consequences. And once those arrived, Tim Walz folded like a cheap suit. Let's get into it. All right, guys, welcome back to RPW Media. Now, for weeks, you watched Minnesota drift. Leadership wasn't leading. Law enforcement was told to stand down. Protesters were indulged. Federal officers were treated like villains. Messaging mattered more than responsibility. But here's the part that you weren't supposed to notice. The moment consequences showed up, everything changed. Now, almost overnight, local police were unleashed on Minneapolis. Officers who had once been given a stand-down order were suddenly enforcing the law again. Arrests began, confidence evaporated. The illusion of immunity collapsed pretty fast. Now, this first clip is how Minneapolis police offered to let the rioters disperse on their own. Give it a watch.
Village drive to immediately disperse and cease your unlawful behavior, which means leave the area peacefully. If you do not do so, you will be subject to arrest or subject to other police action. Other police action could include the use of chemical agents and the use of crowd control tactics.
They're warning them.
Less lethal devices, which may inflict significant pain or result in serious injury. The following routes of dispersal are available. Please leave to the south or the southeast towards Hemlock.
And when they decided that they were not going to accept the offer, this is what happened.
Under arrest. Please sit down and wait for instruction.
All right, so law enforcement right now is chasing protesters down and doing a mass arrest.
Oh, yeah. They warned you. They warned you. But here's where it gets interesting. This wasn't a spontaneous decision by Governor Walz or Mayor French Fry. This shift came after a phone call with President Donald Trump. And that single detail explains everything. Reports describe the call as very productive. That phrase does a lot of heavy lifting. By the time the call happened, federal authorities already knew what was really going on. Independent journalists had accessed encrypted signal chats used to organize unrest. Independent journalist Cam Higbee posted on X, Minneapolis signal infiltrated. I have been undercover inside the groups for days. You'll notice emojis next to people's names. Here's a key for what those emojis mean. Now he's scrolling a list of everybody in the signal chat. He continues, the highlighted positions are the most crucial. Most are self-explanatory. Mobile patrols spend their entire shift searching for suspicious vehicles. When they find one, they send it to the group so that plate checkers can compare with their database and see if it's a known federal vehicle or if the patrol can make the confirmation so that the database can be updated. Dispatch runs a maxed out call a day telling protesters where ICE has been spotted and how they can be best impeded. The chats allegedly included Minnesota officials and individuals connected to the governor's administration. A campaign strategist linked to the governor appeared inside the network. Evidence pointed higher. Funding trails allegedly led overseas. Guys, that was the turning point. When foreign money intersects with state assets and coordinated interference with federal law enforcement, this stops being protest politics. Investigators found alleged misuse of government databases to identify ICE vehicles, run plates, deploy agitators, and interfere with lawful arrests. It's not dissent, it's obstruction. Special Forces experts compared the operation to coordinated PSYOPs missions, teams, roles, training, objectives. And once federal agencies saw that, the response was inevitable. The FBI launched a sweeping investigation. Border enforcement arrived on site. The president publicly used the word insurrection. At that moment, there was nowhere left to hide. So Walz did what politicians always do when the walls are closing in. The walls are closing in on Walz. He reached for the phone and he called President Trump. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, Minneapolis law enforcement reversed course. ICE resumed operations. Protest activity collapsed. Accountability returned. This had nothing to do with safety. It was about leverage. Signal chats were secure. Database misuse was documented. Financial connections were under scrutiny. Legal consequences were no longer theoretical. You've seen this pattern before. New York City folded the same way. Sanctuary rhetoric thrives only when federal enforcement pulls punches. Once pressure is applied, it crumbles. Behind closed doors, the administration deployed what officials openly call a flood of zone strategy. Overwhelming presence, no ambiguity, no room for interference. It worked. Minnesota authorities reportedly agreed to honor immigration detainers. Sanctuary protections evaporated. Local law enforcement now holds illegal migrants for ICE instead of releasing them. Door-to-door risk disappeared. Enforcement efficiency improved. Order returned. In exchange, Trump agreed to reduce a limited portion of federal resources. Cooperation brings relief, guys. Resistance brings more pressure. The lesson could not be clearer. Sanctuary policies exist only when the law is optional. Once enforcement becomes consistent, the chaos ends. This was a decisive win for the Trump administration. Federal law was enforced. Political obstruction failed. Governor Walz learned that defiance has a shelf life. Others were watching closely, and the message was unmistakable. This wasn't optics. This was not compromise. This was reality asserting itself. When the law is enforced, order follows. Law and order. When consequences exist, chaos retreats. That's the upside. And it's a reminder that leadership matters when it actually leads. So tell me what you guys think in the comments below. I love hearing from you. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.